Billionaire's Island Bride, written by Judy Angelo, read by Karina Olette.
Billionaire Mogul versus Rebel Island Bride, and the winner is... Normally shy and reserved, college student Erin Samuels goes to the island of Santa Marta, where she breaks out of her shell and does things that shock even her. And as if that weren't bad enough, she ends up trapped in a marriage by blackmail. Dare D'Souza is used to women throwing themselves at him, and he lumps Erin Samuels into the same category. Gold diggers. That's what they all are. But this time, he has a plan. He sets out to teach Erin a lesson she'll never forget, and ends up learning the greatest lesson of his life. An island romance that will keep readers guessing every step. Chapter 1. Come on, Erin. Just get it over with. She shook her head and bit her lip. That was easy for Robin to say. Robin was the daring one, but she'd never done anything like this in her life. Go for it, Maria said in support. Erin could have happily smacked her. Perspiration settled on her brow, but it was not from the Caribbean sun that bore down from the cloudless sky. Erin was nervous as hell. Inhaling deeply, she floated her palm on top of the sparkling water of the swimming pool and stared across its length to the knot of men sitting at the pool bar. They were drinking, talking, and laughing, their backs to the pool and the swimmers, their lower bodies submerged in the water. The pool bar was a popular location, and all the concrete stools were taken, with a few of the men resorting to standing in the waist-high water and leaning on the counter. Just do it and get it over with, Erin. That was Tisha talking. Erin turned to look back at the group, and not for the first time since they'd arrived on the island of Santa Marta, she wondered what in heaven's name was she doing here with them. They were like a rainbow coalition. Robin with her pale, freckled skin and copper-red hair, Maria with her waist-length black hair and Latin features, and Tisha with her shoulder-length braids and mahogany skin. And then there was her, with her creamy skin and chestnut-brown hair. But they were not a coalition by any means. She was the odd one out. They were all from wealthy families, privileged girls who thought nothing of making trips to the islands for sun, sea, and sand. She, on the other hand, had only made it here through the generosity of Robin's parents and their suggestion that Robin take a well-deserved break from on-campus work. She'd spent several months with them while in foster care, and they'd been very kind. Now, even though years had passed since she left, they still insisted on reaching out to her from time to time with small surprises. This trip was a huge surprise. Erin had not been pleased at the sudden addition to her travel party, but she'd finally conceded at her parents' insistence. Erin suspected she'd given in, only because she thought she'd found a ready-made gopher for the trip. Now, here she was, caught in a stupid dare, one that her sense of fairness would not let her get out of. The other girls had all performed their assigned tasks, which ranged from flirting with strangers to kissing the bartender. And although she'd told them she was not interested, she'd been roped into the game. Now it was her turn. She refused to kiss anyone, but they demanded that she meet them halfway. So she'd agreed to the task: select a man, strike up a conversation, and if he asked her out within 2 minutes of meeting her, she'd win the bet. Stupid? Sure, but she was tired of the harassment and the accusation of being a wet blanket. She'd do it and then tell them to leave her the heck alone. Tisha swam up to her. I see a real cutie. Check out the blonde-haired guy. Following the girl's fingers, she stared at the back of a tall, well-built man with spiky hair. As she watched, he turned to the man beside him and, laughing out loud, gave him a slap on the back. The blonde-haired man seemed friendly enough, and probably would not take offense, but still, for some reason she had reservations about approaching him. He might like the attention too much. Surveying the backs of her potential victims, Erin's eyes fell on the strong, lean torso of a dark-haired man. He sat with his back straight, although he seemed relaxed in every other way. He was sipping a martini, and though he often smiled at the jokes of the other men, he seemed more reserved, even aloof. This man, clad in hip-hugging black swim trunks, exuded a power which seemed to draw her to him. Immediately she knew he would be her target. He looked like a serious kind of guy who would just have a normal conversation with her and then let her go. She didn't care if he asked her out or not. She just wanted the task to be over, and that would be the end of that. Sucking in a deep breath, Erin began a slow wade through the waist-high water. She never took her eyes off the back of her now-chosen prey. She was halfway across the pool when she heard the giggling behind her. Turning, she gave the girls a scathing look. They held their hands over their mouths, still sniggering, but thankfully they'd quietened down. The last thing she needed right now was distraction. Slowly, Erin turned and continued her slow march through the water. All right, she was scared, but she'd never backed away from a challenge, and she certainly wasn't going to start now. More than that, at all costs she wanted to avoid Robin's sulking. The girl was a whiner and a bully, and tonight Erin did not want to have to deal with the drama. She was almost there now. She could see the damp hair curling at the nape of her victim's neck. He was laughing, a deep rumble that emphasized his masculinity. Was this a man she could flirt with? She bit her lip and kept walking. Too late to turn back now. So focused was she on getting to her target that she forgot the curved metal bar that ran underwater behind the stools. She bumped her foot, lost her balance, and began to pitch forward towards the man. She panicked. Flinging her arms up, Erin grabbed for the nearest support, anything to keep her from falling. That happened to be the dark stranger's shoulder. She pulled him off his stool, throwing him backwards into the liquid blue of the pool. There was a shout and a huge splash, and to her horror, he disappeared beneath the surface. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry!" Her hands flew up to her mouth and she stared wide-eyed as her victim jumped up, coughing, black hair pasted down on his head, water streaming down his face. Her eyes rose to his face and she took an involuntary step back, suddenly overwhelmed by the sheer height of him. While sitting, he had looked tall, but now, face to face, he towered over her 5 feet 4 inches. He was still coughing, and by now his friends at the pool bar were laughing heartily at his demise. Even her friends' giggles had turned to peals of laughter. But Erin did not take her eyes off the man in front of her. His black hair curled wetly around his tanned face, and the set of his jaw emphasized his square chin. But it was his gray eyes, so unusual in his dark face, that held her gaze. She could not look away. Like a wild cat, he was watching her. Now she was the prey. The look on his face made it clear that she was in deep trouble. He took a step towards her and she backed away. "You want to play, do you?" Before she could move another inch, he caught her wrist and pulled her up against his hard body. She was pressed so close that she could feel the ripples of his stomach muscles against her chest. When he dipped her head, she jerked back and clamped her lips shut. What in the world? Was he trying to kiss her? Was he crazy? Suddenly, Erin felt herself falling backwards, and as she hit the water, she shrieked. It was cut short when she went under, but in seconds she was up, coughing and spluttering, glaring at the now laughing man who stood before her. "You beast!" she yelled. "What are you trying to do? Kill me?" "Two can play, my dear." His smug expression, his laughing mouth, the amusement in his eyes so incensed Erin that before she knew what she was doing, her hands flew up to shove him in the chest. But he was quick, too quick for her. As it went up, he grabbed her wrist. Then, staring deep into her eyes, he turned her hand slowly and bent his head to plant a searing kiss in the middle of her palm. The touch of his lips sent an electric jolt shooting up her arm and through her body. She snatched her hand from him. With all the haughtiness that she could muster, she held her head high, turned and pushed through the water and away from the laughing man. "I'm leaving," she said to the girls, her voice clipped and cold. To her surprise and relief, they followed her out of the pool without protest. saving her the indignity of listening to the man's mocking laughter. Dare watched the curvy brunette leave the pool, her posse of giggling friends in tow. She'd looked very young, but she was obviously in charge. Although the smallest in the group, she held herself like a queen, and the 3 girls tripped after her. "You're getting old, man." His attorney, Ed, slapped him on the back, still laughing. "Normally, you don't let them get away that easily. Are you losing your touch?" He shook his head, still watching the girl's delectable tush in her hot pink bikini as she disappeared around the corner of the pool hut and out of his view. Only then did he turn to Ed. "No, still on the ball, but you've got to know how far to go with girls like her." "Girls like her?" Ed raised his eyebrows. "You know her?" "Don't need to. I know those kinds of girls, and that's all that counts." "Meanin'?" "Didn't you see that was a setup? That was no accident. That girl and her friends were after something." "Meanin' you?" "I've had enough of them throwing themselves at me to know when there's just another groupie around." Somehow she didn't seem that way to me." It was the first time Roger had spoken. He'd done his share of laughing, but had made no comments throughout the whole episode. Now Dare's accountant sounded amused, but mildly protective. "Hold up." Dare gave him a hard look. "Don't tell me you're falling for that game. Don't you see it was all a ruse to get my attention?" "What makes you think?" Dare held up his hand, effectively silencing the balding man. "I don't think. I know. I heard them giggling back there long before she attacked. I knew they were up to something. I just didn't expect a near drowning." "I think you have it wrong, senor." All 3 men turned back to the counter to the smiling bartender. He was busy wiping glasses, but it was obvious he'd been listening and had formed his own opinion, one he was more than willing to share. "How's that then, Danny?" Dare had to listen to this one. "Been observing those girls for the last couple of days, and the tiny one who jumped you is as harmless as a kitten." Dare stared at Danny's wide smile, incredulous. "That kitten almost drowned me." "Nah, she just tripped. I think she was trying to flirt with you." "And is that any better than trying to come on to me? I'm sick of being stalked." "Oh, senor, I should have your problem." All the men at the bar laughed at Danny's comment, and he laughed too, but he was not done. "It's those other girls you should worry about. For the last 2 days they've been in the pool daring one another to do all kinds of crazy things." He slid a fresh martini in front of Dare. "Today is the first time I saw the little one get involved. I guess they must have goaded her into it." Dare was silent for a moment, thinking. He delayed his response by sipping at the drink. Somehow he was not convinced by Danny's defense, but still he was intrigued. He could still feel the petite girl's luscious breast pressed into his chest, even though he'd held her for less than 2 seconds. She was appealing, no doubt about that, and there was something about her that made him want to see her again. But he'd better let go of that feeling and fast. He wouldn't fall for that trick again. "Danny boy, you have a lot to learn." He laughed good-naturedly at the bartender. "Gold diggers come in all shapes and sizes." "Dare, I'm shocked. This is not like you," Ed said, imitating the voice of an elderly schoolmarm. Dare couldn't help laughing out loud, and then he got serious. "I have lots of reasons to be like this, and it comes from not-so-pleasant experiences. One in particular, but he wasn't going to go into that with them. Let's forget about them and get back to a more interesting topic, like basketball." The men got to their previous conversation, and in no time they were engrossed in Roger's account of the most exciting basketball final of all time, the Chicago Bulls against Utah Jazz in 1998, when Michael Jordan scored the winning basket in the last minute of the game, locking Utah out and winning 87-86. He'd been there and never tired of recounting his experience. Dare joined in the conversation at all the appropriate moments, but his mind was far away, wondering if he would see the pixie again. After the way his body had reacted to her, it would be best if he never did. Chapter 2.
I can't believe you did it.
Robin's voice was tinged with disbelief. Erin bit her lip, wanting to shout that it was a stupid thing to do. Instead, she shook her head and walked over to the villa's wide bay window that faced the white sandy beach and brilliant blue sea. The island was beautiful, a paradise on earth, but here she was in the middle of all this beauty, and all she was feeling was miserable. She'd almost drowned a man and had embarrassed herself in the process, all in the name of fitting in. Somehow, it didn't seem like it had been worth it. And what a man she'd picked. He was obviously not like the fun-loving guys who had fallen prey to her friend's pranks. This one obviously did not appreciate being jumped. She should have known that from his posture. He was no college kid, that was for sure. More like some big-shot businessman. A really hot businessman. Her mind rushed back to the feel of his muscled torso pressed against her breasts, and her breath quickened. Even now, just at the memory of it, a delicious shiver coursed through her body. But the man was a jerk for dunking her like that. Attraction or no attraction, he was the kind of man to stay far away from. She just prayed that for the rest of her week on the island, she would not run into him again.
Come on, Erin. Get out of that funk. Let's take a dip in the ocean.
Maria took her by the shoulders and began to steer her towards the French doors.
The day is young. We're bound to find some hunks lounging on the beach.
That did it for Erin. She'd had enough of hunks for one day.
You guys go on ahead. I'll just catch up on some reading.
On spring break? Tisha huffed in disgust. You never know when to quit, do you? Erin smiled ruefully, not wanting to dampen their spirits.
Yeah, that's me. Gotta get my daily fix or I'll have withdrawal symptoms. You guys go on and have fun. I'll see you later.
And before they could object, she turned and headed for her bedroom, closing the door firmly behind her. That evening, Erin woke to the sound of the girls returning from what must have been an exhilarating day at the beach. They were even louder than usual, giggling and screaming as they burst into the villa. Could she survive another 3 days of this? She wished Robin's parents hadn't bought the airline ticket for her. She would have gladly remained behind at college, locked away in the library, absorbed in a stack of books. She sighed in relief when they didn't bother to knock on her door, but instead showered and dressed to go down to the garden for the buffet-style dinner that was usually served there. She wasn't hungry, and worse, she didn't want to take the chance of running into that man again. Erin was deep into the history of medieval European art when the girls returned.
Give it a break, Erin.
Robin walked over to the sofa and grabbed the tome out of her hands.
You do know how to kill a party. Why do you have to study all the time?
I'm not studying. For me, that's fun reading. Erin forced a smile, not wanting to dampen their mood. So, how was dinner?
Good food like always.
Tisha kicked off her sandals and walked over to turn on the TV. Then she flopped down onto the couch across from Erin. I ate so much fried fish and tacos. I feel like I'm going to pop.
I've got the perfect way to work off all this food.
Robin's eyes sparkled. Erin's heart sank. What weird scheme was she cooking up now?
There's a new DJ coming to the resort nightclub. He's from Japan, and word is he's really good. Keeps the dance floor hopping, is what I hear. Does he play salsa?
Maria swayed her hips to imaginary music.
He can play anything. All you have to do is request it.
So, what time do we hit the dance floor? Tisha looked more than interested. She was always one for a good dance party. She could dance all night and not break a sweat.
What time can you be ready, Erin?
Robin gave her a pointed look. Me? I didn't say I was going.
You've been hiding out in your room all afternoon, and you've been studying on spring break. Only heaven knows why. I'm not leaving you in here to take the color off the walls.
It's okay, I'm fine.
No, it's not fine. My dad didn't fly you down here so that you could be a drag and spoil all the fun. We're all supposed to be having fun together.
Erin's smile froze and she stared back at Robin's determined face. She hadn't just thrown that in her face, had she? But one look at the girl's unapologetic glare said that she had, and she was not taking it back. So that was it. Because Robin's father had paid for her trip to Santa Marta, Erin was beholden to her and was supposed to follow her every command. She was here to make sure Robin had fun. Obviously, that was what the redhead thought, or else she wouldn't be staring back at her so smugly after making a comment like that. Okay, now she knew where she stood, and she could not wait for the week to pass. In the meanwhile, she would play along with Robin's game, humor her if that's what she wanted. Then, when they got back to Vancouver, she would go back to her life on college campus, far away from Robin and her demands. By the time they were ready to leave, at about 9 o'clock that night, Erin felt a little better. She might as well try to have some fun. After all, she might never have the opportunity to have an island vacation again. She'd spend lots of time trying to look good. Her normally curly hair had been brushed straight and swept up in a chignon, high on top of her head. The new look made her feel sophisticated, confident. She'd picked a black dress with a flared skirt that fell just above the knees, and she was wearing her favorite high-heeled sandals, the ones with the rhinestones on the straps. She might not be the best dressed in the group, but she could stand beside any of them. As they walked along the cobbled pathway leading from their villa to the main building of the tropical resort, Erin breathed in deeply, savoring the fruity smell of the flowers that lined the path. It was a balmy, tropical night. The gentle breeze from the ocean wafted over her skin, and the sound of the rolling waves was soothing in her ears. Despite the problems, she'd been enjoying her stay on the island and didn't want to think about leaving all this to go back to cold Vancouver just yet. They knew they were close to the nightclub when they heard the horns, trumpets, and steel pans of the island music. "Hey, I don't know how to dance to this kind of music," Tisha said with a pout. Maria laughed.
You? You can dance to anything, girl. I've seen you on the dance floor.
Tisha looked pleased and started to sway her hips to the liquid sounds, her gold dress floating around her athletic legs.
"That's not how you do it,"
Robin chimed in, obviously determined to turn the spotlight back on herself.
"When you do these island dances, you have to be real sexy and twist your hips like this."
She started to gyrate in tight circles and soon had her friends dissolving into helpless laughter. Dancing was definitely not one of Robin's talents. By the time they entered the nightclub, Erin's mood was much lighter, even carefree. The enthusiasm of the girls was rubbing off on her and she was ready to dance. At first, they all four danced as a group, forming a tight little circle in the crowd of people. When the DJ switched from merengue to the steady rhythms of reggae, they kept on dancing, bobbing to the sounds of Bob Marley's "We Jammin'." Tisha really showed her moves when the DJ began to play dancehall music. The deep, gravelly sound of Sean Paul's lyrics filled the room, and she began a slow, sexy movement of the hips that had Erin staring in fascination. The people dancing closest to their group were watching Tisha too, and soon they were cheering her on, clapping to the tune of the music while she danced. When the song ended, they all clapped and she curtsied cutely in appreciation. Erin was not surprised when a handsome, honey-colored man approached her friend and asked her for a dance. Tisha gave him a brilliant smile, obviously flattered by his attention, and sauntered off to the other end of the dance floor. Maria, who loved attention, began a sexy Latin dance. No matter that the music had no Latin flavor at all. She was not used to Tisha usurping her position as the most visible and most attractive member of the group. She wanted to win her position back. As she danced, her body-hugging red dress glittered under the strobe lights, emphasizing her voluptuous hips and ample curves. Her long hair swayed, tickling her bottom like a scarf of jet-black silk. Maria now began to get the attention she craved, with the crowd giving her the cheers and claps they'd just showered on Tisha. This only spurred her on to more risque moves, and Erin stared in surprise as the Latin beauty suddenly dipped to the floor and came back up, sliding her body up the length of a thin, brown-haired man who'd been watching her in fascination. She began dancing close to the man, rubbing against him, teasing him, then pulling back only to press into him again. He was obviously loving it. He slid a tentative arm around her, and then she pressed into him. He became bolder, matching her dips and sways with jerky movements of his own. The crowd closed around the dancing couple, and then there were two. Erin rocked to the beat of the music and smiled over at Robin, wondering how soon it would be before she found a partner and disappeared too. She did not have to wait long. Apparently, getting bored with Erin as her dance partner, Robin gave her a little wave and pushed through the crowd toward the bar. Robin could never go too long without a drink. Now Erin was alone. She pasted a fake smile on her face and continued to bob to the music that had suddenly become tedious. But she couldn't go running off the dance floor like a frightened doe, so she stayed there, alone in a sea of people, rocking to the steady rhythm of the music. When the DJ switched to slow music, it gave her the perfect excuse to finally exit the dance floor. She slid through the mass of dancing couples and headed in the direction of the bar. At least Robin would be there. But she was not. Erin's eyes skimmed the bar, searching for the emerald green dress, but it was nowhere in sight. She sighed. Robin must have found a guy and gone back to the dance floor. She would just have to entertain herself for a while. "Hey, baby, you look hot." Erin turned and came face to face with a bespectacled man, probably in his late 40s, with receding brown hair and a wide grin. "Wanna dance?" No, thank you. I'm taking a break right now." Erin smiled as she spoke the words, not wanting to hurt the man's feelings. "Aw, come on. I saw you on the dance floor. You're a great dancer. Come show me some of your moves." The man reached out and put a hand on her shoulders, and she felt a shudder go through her. He had some nerve. She jerked away from his touch. "I don't really feel like dancing right now," she said, her voice firm. "I'm thirsty." As she spoke, she was sliding away, trying to get closer to the bar and away from the man. "Oh, it's a drink you want? No problem, honey. That's what I'm here for. Then we can have some fun." The man reached out again, and this time he grasped her upper arm. "Let go of me." Wrenching her arm from his grasp, Erin lurched backwards and came hard up against a man's solid back. Now look what that idiot made her do. Giving him a withering glare. "I'm so sorry," she said, turning around to face the person she had stumbled into, and her words of apology died on her lips. The man from the pool. She was staring up into his cool gray eyes, and she could see he was not amused. "Still at it?" he began, brows drawing together in a frown. "Why don't you—" "Darling, there you are," she gushed, cutting him off. His frown deepened, but before he could say another word, she put her arm around his shoulder in a quick hug. "I'll have that drink now," she said loudly, with a giggle as she took his arm and tried to turn him back to face the bar. He did not budge. Her heart skipped. He was going to blow her cover. She stole a glance up at his face, and his eyes bored into her. She could not read his expression, but she knew he was angry. She made one last try. "A pina colada would be lovely." Erin gave him her best flirtatious smile, and her heart melted with relief as a slow, cynical smile spread across his lips. In one fluid movement, he slid off the bar stool and stood before her, and for that moment she was very close to him, so close that she could smell the spicy fragrance of his cologne. She breathed in, then gasped as his big hands spanned her waist. He lifted her effortlessly and sat her down on top of the stool he had just vacated. He spun it round so that she was facing the bar, then leaned in beside her. "A pina colada for the lady." "Coming right up." The bartender gave him a nod and within seconds was sliding a frothy glass in front of her. Not knowing what to say next, she dipped her head and took the straw between her lips. She sucked the sweet, foamy liquid into her mouth, glad for the way it soothed her parched throat. Finally, she looked at him. His face was so close, She could see the faint shadow on his chin. The slight stubble gave him a rakish air. For some reason, her breath became ragged. "Thank you," she said, then licked her lips, that suddenly felt so dry. She glanced back into the crowd for the man who'd made her flee, but he was nowhere in sight. She glanced back at the man from the pool, and he was watching her, so intently that she dropped her eyes back to her glass. Her fingers trembled as she cooled her palms on the cold glass. Bending her head, she took another sip of her drink, glad for the excuse to break eye contact with him while her mind raced to find another way to get out of this mess. "Let's dance." Relief flooded through her as she realized she would not have to make conversation with this man who'd probably thought she'd been stalking him. They would dance for a minute, and then she would thank him and disappear into the crowd. Then hopefully she would never have to see him again. Now, why did that thought make her heart slide down to her toes? She slipped off her stool and took the hand he offered. A quiver went through her and she bit her lip. His was a large hand, warm and strong, and she could imagine such a hand sliding up her body, cupping her breasts in a bold caress. "Erin, stop it." She gave her head a quick shake and focused on her new dance partner as he led her towards the dance floor. Once she was safely hidden in the crowd, Erin gently pulled on her hand, wanting to break contact as soon as possible. To her dismay, instead of releasing her, the man pulled her closer to him and began to sway to the sounds of Boys to Men's "I'll Make Love to You." Erin wanted to resist. She really did. But his body felt so good against hers as he held her close, and the music was so sensual that she felt her reserves melt like the ice in her piña colada. She relaxed as the music pulsated around them. She closed her eyes and let him lead, swaying her hips and matching his every move. His hands slid to the small of her back, and a delicious tingle ran all the way up her spine. Now was the time to thank him for the dance and make a hasty exit, but her tongue felt heavy in her mouth. She closed her eyes. She could not speak. "What's your name?" Erin jumped. The man had bent his head and his lips were close to her ears, so close that his warm breath tickled the fine hairs on her skin. "I'm Erin. And you?" "I'm Dare," he said, softly in her ear, and the way he said it made her shiver. Dare. What an unusual name. But it certainly seemed appropriate for this man, holding her close on the dance floor, so bold and unapologetic. The strains of the song died away, and Erin took a deep breath. This was her chance. She cleared her throat. "Thank you for the dance," she began, then gasped as the man, Dare, whatever his name was, grasped her hand and started walking off the dance floor, pulling her along with him. She looked around frantically. Where were the girls? She needed to be rescued now. Her eyes skimmed the sea of people, but in the mass of bodies there was hardly any chance she would ever find her sweet mates. Tugging her arm, Erin blurted, "Where are you taking me?" Dare spared her a backward glance. "This place is getting too crowded for me. Let's get out of here." Get out of here? To where? He was forgetting that they hadn't arrived at the nightclub together. "Excuse me," she tugged again, "but I'm not going anywhere with a stranger." The man ignored her. By this time, they were out a side door and onto a terrace surrounded by an abundant tropical garden. Dare let go of her wrist and leaned his shoulder against a cast-iron trellis through which flowered vines twisted and coiled. As he lounged, his folded arms across his chest, watching her. "So, what's that about us being strangers? After all we've shared, a hug, a dance, a dunk in the pool, I thought we were more than that." He gave a dry chuckle. She bit her lip and looked away. She could understand how it all looked. As far as he was concerned, she'd been the one doing the pursuing. She could only guess what he must think of her. She took a deep breath, thinking fast. Should she tell him the truth about the stupid dare, or would he think her a crazy college student who would do anything for kicks? Maybe that wouldn't paint her in such a good light, but she could at least tell him about the stalker in the nightclub. He would surely understand her actions then. She opened her mouth to speak, and the man chose that moment to reach out and pull her to him. Caught off guard, she tilted into him. He took the opportunity to turn with her, then backed her up against the trellis, pressing her into the flowery metal frame. Dare raised one arm and rested it on the metal bar above her head, effectively trapping her between himself and the wall. His eyes glinted in the moonlight as he stared down at her. Erin's heart thumped and she swallowed hard. Goodness, how was she going to get out of this predicament in a dignified manner? Kiss me. What? That's what you want, isn't it? Now's your chance. I don't know what you're talking about. She glared up at him, shocked by his audacity. You threw yourself at me twice in one day. I have to reward all that effort. Now kiss me. Dare's tone was commanding. He put a finger under her chin and tilted her face towards his. Erin's heart pounded. He was going to kiss her, and she wanted it. Dear God, she wanted it. But she'd always been the good girl. Did she dare? She did. When his lips touched hers, she did not stop him. She did not pull away. Erin closed her eyes tight and clung to his muscled arms. His lips were hard, unyielding. His arms snaked around her and pulled her tight against his body, so unyielding. His arms snaked around her and pulled her tight against his body, so close that she could feel the rippling muscles of his torso against her breasts. She kept her eyes closed, not daring to look into those enigmatic gray eyes, not wanting to read what lay in their depths. Then, all coherent thought flew from her mind as Dare softened his kiss, his lips moving sensually over hers and stealing her breath away. Erin leaned into him, her nipples as hard as pebbles, and then she was kissing him back, answering his passion with a fervor that was alien to her. She moaned under the caress of his lips. Erin trembled in Dare's arms. Her body was responding to him like she'd done with no other man before, and as she stood there wrapped in his arms, Erin knew that she was in deep trouble. Chapter 3. Slowly, Dare lifted his head and turned down into the dazed eyes of the girl in his arms. What was she doing to him? He'd meant to dominate her, knock her off balance with his kiss. After all, she'd been pursuing him all day. It was time to take her up on what she was offering, maybe even teach her a lesson in the process. But, to his chagrin, it was he who was caught off guard. The kiss had left him breathless. Damn, was he getting soft? He released her and put her away from him. Only then did he speak. "I want to see you again. Let's have dinner tomorrow." Her eyes widened in apparent shock. "Dinner? But I don't know you." Dare almost laughed out loud. And what kind of game was she playing? Did she take him for a fool? Why else would she have been coming on to him twice in one day if she didn't know who he was? He would have respected her more if she'd just been honest. "Listen, I know enough about you to know I want to see you again." But no buts. "Do you want to see me again?" He knew he was bullying the girl, but that was the whole idea. She'd decided to play with fire, so it was no fault of his if she got burned. "Yes." Her voice was a mere whisper, her eyes huge pools of iridescent hazel. On her face was a look of uncertainty, tinged with just a hint of anticipation. Dare chuckled inwardly. The girl was playing temptress, but she had a lot to learn. First lesson: don't make your feelings so obvious. With an expressive face like hers, she was going to have a hard task succeeding in her chosen role as seductress. "It's settled then. We'll have dinner tomorrow at Michelangelo's. They have a private lounge where we can eat and talk undisturbed. 7 o'clock. Meet me there." She opened her mouth then, those soft lips still swollen from his kiss, but he cut her off before she even had a chance to utter the first word. There was no way that he was giving her a chance to back out. He'd had a taste of her lips, and deceiver though she may be, he wanted more. He took her by the elbow and turned her towards the pathway. "Come, let me walk you back to your villa." No, she said quickly. "No, thank you. I'm fine. I can get back on my own." He shrugged. "Until tomorrow, then. 7 o'clock. He watched her hurry away, heels clicking on the cobbled stones along the lighted path. He had no concern for her safety. He'd made sure that security was at its highest level at his resort, with plain-clothed security guards patrolling the grounds 24 hours a day. In his past 5 years operating the resort, he'd never had a visitor fall victim to a crime on his grounds. He was determined to keep the records spotless. Dare D'Souza was an entrepreneur and had been since as long as he could remember. He'd grown up in Michigan, and while in elementary school he'd run a candy business, buying bags of candy for $1 and selling the sweets to his classmates for $0.25 apiece. When his homeroom teacher found out about it, he had to abandon his enterprise. But by high school, he'd graduated to selling soda pop and comic books and was raking in a few $100s a week. By the time he'd started his engineering degree at MIT, he was running an online trading company specializing in collectible items, a business which he sold in his senior year for over $1 million. With this seed money, he'd started yet another business, another trading company that far surpassed the success of the first, and was soon the head of a multi-million-dollar operation. Then he attended a wedding on the island of Santa Marta and was hooked for life. He loved the richness of the island, the verdant pastures and the vibrant green of the tropical foliage, the brilliant blue of the sea and sky, the cotton white of the clouds, and the rich reds of the flora. Everything seemed to practically glow with life. He'd spent a week there and vowed that he would be back. Next time he visited the island, it was for a site visit, and on his third trip he signed the document for the purchase of sensational resort on the northern coast where the best beaches lay. It was family-owned, but had been neglected due to lack of funds. The couple's children were less than enthusiastic for the hotel business, so they were all too happy when Dare offered them over $100 million for the place. And then the rebuilding began, renovating, refurbishing, and advertising to let the public know the resort was under new management. Sensational Resort burst back onto the scene and outshone its rivals, soon placing among the top 10 resorts in the Caribbean. He expanded to other islands until he had resorts in 4 additional Caribbean locations. He'd found a winning enterprise and he was loving it. But that brought with it a host of challenges, fighting off gold diggers being one of the annoying things he'd had to deal with. Just a year ago, he'd